everybody, and welcome to today's episode of this Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and I'm very excited for today's guest to be joining me. I was going to say in the studio, but over Zoom, either way, because many of you who are in the organizing space or love the organizing space are familiar with her and her work. So joining me is Shira Gill. And many of you know her from her work on Instagram. She's like organizer to celebrities, and she has a new book out that we are going to be talking about, which we're going to have links to. And I got a sneak peek, and it is gorgeous, to say the least. Total inspiration. But for those of you who don't know who Shira is, she's a professional organizer in my space as well. Her work's been featured everywhere. Like, let me just read some of the places. She's been featured in Apartment Therapy and Forbes and Goop and Harper's Bazaar and HGTV and Real Simple. I mean, the list goes on and on. And again, if you ever take a look at her Instagram feed, you will see why. Her work is absolutely total inspiration worthy. And she lives personally in the San Francisco area. She's also a mom and a wife and a dog mom as well. So we love her, because anybody who loves dogs, we love dogs. But again, she has a new book that is, at the time of our recording, not quite out, but I believe at the time that this drops, it will be available. So we will have links, and we want everybody to go and check that out and support my friend Shira Gill. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her out to the show. Shira, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you for that very kind introduction.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know our paths have crossed several times over the years, and so excited to be able to have the chance to chat with you and share all the great things that are going on for you. Congrats on the book. And just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are. So I gave a real top line overview, of course, but in your own words, can you just tell everybody a little bit about who you are in this world, in this great organizing world?
So I guess I think of myself as a stuff and life editor. So I'm kind of a hybrid between a home organizer, a stylist, and a life coach. I did get a life coach certification maybe halfway into my career. And I really help people clear physical and mental clutter, both in my home organizing one-on-one with clients, programs, workshops, speaking, and now my new book, Minimalista.
I love it. It's so great. I can't wait to have like the hard copy, because I was reading the digital version, and I'm still an old school book reader. Yeah. And I was like, I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I want to turn the pages.
It's much better in person.
I'm sure it is. So, and it's funny because this is your first book.
It is my first book.
Yeah. I was like, I really, because I was like, I kind of feel like she's had another book out, but so congrats. It's super exciting. It's very exciting to have that kind of stamp in the world. It was
a bucket list thing for sure. Both of my parents were published authors. And so it was always kind of in the back of my head, like one day. And so it's thrilling to have it finally happen.
Well, it's awesome. And congrats on that. So before we dive into the book, because obviously we're going to talk about it and give people tips and strategies. And by the way, you wrote the book during the pandemic while you were homeschooling kids. So like, hats off on that alone,
Thank you. It was not the vision I had for how I was going to write this book. I imagined myself, at the cafes with my coffee, and I was really like hiding in my bedroom, begging people not to bother me.
Seriously. That in and of itself is just a huge accomplishment. But I want to kind of have almost a different spin. I was saying to you, obviously we're going to talk about organizing. Everyone knows you're organized, but I want to talk about let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about you and your childhood. Because I think for so many of us, like the way that we show up in the world now, especially when it comes to clutter and organization, and this in the work that you do, and I know this, has so much to do with how it started in childhood, whether it's one extreme or another. So tell us a little bit about kind of your story as a kid.
Sure. So I grew up in Berkeley, California. I was born in San Francisco. My parents met on the East Coast in New York. My dad was a diehard New Yorker, but ended up being coaxed to the West by my mom. And, in a lot of ways, I had a great childhood. My parents were very supportive of me. Always, I had good friends. I went to great schools, but they separated when I was 3. I was an only child. And kind of struggled, getting back together and trying to make it work until I was 8, and had kind of a like out of a bad movie divorce when I was 8. So like custody battles in court and the whole thing. And so I think at a young age, really, I just was craving order and calm and for things to feel like they were in control, because my life as a little kid felt a little out of control. And so I think in the context of organization, I mean, my parents were kind of, liberal hippie intellectuals who definitely prized, community over consumerism. So I learned that at a young age. But I think in terms of just order and tidiness, it was a way for me to feel like I had some control in a world that felt a little messy. And I also discovered acting at a young age. You probably don't know this. It's like a little known fact.
I don't.
Yeah. So my parents divorced when I was 8. And literally that same year, I was a very shy kid. And I kind of just came out and was like, I want to be an actor, and started landing roles, even at like the University of Berkeley. I was like the kid actor that they hired.
No
and
way.
I think it also was a way of just expressing all of the kind of feelings that I had of like being this only kid in a broken home with a lot of fighting and chaos. And it was a safe space for me to express big emotion on stage. So that was really like my whole childhood was acting.
Wow. I was
know.
today years old when I learned this. I had no idea. So did you think that was something that you were going to do like professionally, or
100%.
was really, did you go to school for it?
I did. Yeah. So I was a theater major in college. And then I even moved to England to study and to perform in England. I then moved to Chicago to study at Second City because I wanted to be the next Gilda Radner. That did not happen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had a whole.
You had a whole world. You had a whole world that we don't even know about in the organization.
I know. I kind of forget to mention it because it doesn't feel relevant anymore, but it was 20 years of my life was just acting. That was it. That was all I cared about.
So what made you like, what was the pivot to have you come full circle to where you are now?
Yeah. So I'll try to make it a fast story.
So take your time. We got time. People want to know.
Okay. So I was acting in the theater. I lived in Chicago for Second City. I lived in San Francisco. I lived abroad, and just theater all through my 20s. And at a certain point, I knew I wanted to get married and have kids. And I felt like the lifestyle was not going to be compatible with this other life that I wanted, because my whole life was auditioning and traveling and dropping everything and nights and weekends. And so essentially, I decided I think I was around 28 years old, to leave the world of theater, which was very painful. And I thought, what is the only other thing I love? And it was food. It was not organizing. Not yet.
I'm like, okay.
So I know. I started.
Do you see me like leaning in? I'm actually like leaning in on this conversation because I'm just.
Where is this going?
No, I'm fascinated. I love this. So go for it.
So I went all in on food because I loved food. I loved eating. I loved catering and events and weddings. And so I was in LA, got a job for a talent catering company where I was kind of managing these large scale events. Then we moved back to the Bay Area. My husband and I we were both from, and I was working in catering and realized I love eating. I love going to parties. I do not actually love planning them. And so I was at a total career crossroads of like, I don't know who I am anymore. I was an actor for my whole life. I thought food was the answer. It doesn't feel like the answer. And then at almost 8 months pregnant with my first daughter, I got laid off from my company where I was doing events. And so this is where I kind of had time to sit with myself and think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like, how do I want to spend my time? How can I contribute? And a few good girlfriends said to me, I think you should help people organize. And it was like, at the time, a very bizarre idea. This was like before Marie Kondo.
What year was this? Like what?
So this was, I had my daughter in 2009.
Oh, so it's the same time I started. That's when I started, 2009. Yeah.
So as you know, it was like not how it is today. Like
no,
my
not
parents
at all.
were like, what are you talking about? What is this career you're making up?
Yeah.
And so really it was at the encouragement of good girlfriends who I had always, just for fun, never thinking of it as a career, helped my friends clean out their closets, edit and style their bookshelves. It was one of those just like fun little things that I did. And they said, people need this. People need this help, and helped me put together my first website. And so I had a new baby. I couldn't work a lot because I was our primary childcare. And so I basically launched a very novice website just saying, I can help you edit and organize anything. I can do 3-hour sessions because I was breastfeeding. So that was like my quick window of running out of the house. And literally that's how I launched my business. There was no business plan. And in fact, when I set it up, I was thinking, well, this will be something I'll do for like 3 months until I figure out my real career. And because I was very connected to the kind of mom community and everyone I knew was totally overwhelmed by clutter, I just started booking like the women in my mom's groups and my friends and friends of friends. And before I knew it, I had a wait list. And I thought, well, maybe this could be a thing that I do. So that is my long story.
I know, I love it. And there are certain major differences between our stories, but I think the common theme is, and I think for so many people, especially in this industry, but even people that might be thinking about making a change in their career or going through some life transition, like you and I both kind of stumbled into this because other people were like, you're good at this. And this is something that you just like comes naturally to you and you help other people. Why not you saw a need and you were able to solve a problem. And
exactly. Yeah,
it wasn't complicated. And that was it. And that was similar, my journey was a little different getting there, but that was, similar. And so I say this to people out there, whether it's organizing or something else that you want to do, like you don't have to always have this big fancy business plan. You could just come out there and just start doing it. And the social proof is going to be if people are responding, and then build it from there.
I mean, I really was just make offers to help, and there's people who need my help. Great. That was my whole business plan.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah. I remember people saying to me, wait, people are going to pay you to do that? And I'm like, yeah, they are. Like they are paying me, but people would be like, wait, what? That's really a thing? Because back in 2009, and again, I say this to people, and this, there was no Instagram. There was no Pinterest. There was not, it was totally, total
thing called word of mouth.
Total word of mouth. My daughters, who are now grown, used to say, my mom's in the business of flyers, because I had these flyers that I would print up and I would stick them like in the neighborhood, like in mailboxes. Like I was Willie Loman of organizing, and I would go and I'd be like, hey, if you need an organizer, because they were all local moms, and they'd be in the car seat. And I would drive around and she'd be like, what does your mom, what do your parents do? And they'd go, my mom's in the business of flyers. So
I love that so much. I was also in the business of flyers. I made like little marketing postcards and put them in people's mailboxes, leave them at a yoga studio or a cafe. Yeah. Super scrappy.
It is. And that's it. And seriously, I love it. So, I think it's interesting because I know when I talk to people who like came from a divorce or volatile household, and like even if your parents are together, it could still be volatile. I'm sure my kids say that about us.
Yes.
And we've been together for almost 25 years. That sense of control, like that, that must have given you this feeling of security, which is what translates into, I can only suspect, I don't put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
that, you're physically probably juggling back and forth between house to house, and having order for your stuff gave you a peace. And I know you touched on that, but I'm wondering if you could kind of maybe hone in on that a little bit further, because I think that that's really relevant, because for so many people, whether they're kids, whether they're adults, that's really the piece. It's that feeling of either insecurity from not having that, or like trying to claim that. But people don't always have language
Yeah.
to make that happen. And that's, I try to give people language of,
Yeah.
articulating that. So maybe you could just kind of go a little deeper with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what's interesting is stuff became very oppressive to me as a young age. I think because of my setup of switching back and forth from home to home every other day and kind of physically dragging stuff back and forth. And also, I remember I had to have two of everything, which really bothered me and felt really excessive. And I guess like maybe pointed to early signs that I was going to be a minimalist. But having, like two jackets and two this and two that just felt stressful to me and kind of overstimulating, and managing the stuff and juggling the stuff. And I think for me, I was aware at a very young age at how my environment affected my mood. And so it was that simple. It was like when things felt like they were put away and they were in order, I felt calm and soothed in some way. And when things were messy and sloppy and a jumble and like piles of stuff that I was dragging back and forth, it led to feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And I think, those are the same things I hear echoed in my clients all the time, is this sense of like, there's already so much coming at us just being a human on this earth. There's like nonstop news and social media and stimulation, that then when you go home, you really want your home to feel like a breath of fresh air, and a place that isn't overstimulating. And so I think for me, that need translated into the deep desire to strip away clutter. It was less for me about organization. Like I wasn't the person who like file folded their clothes or put things in rainbow order, but it was more about like just wanting space. That's how I remember it. And I think still today, like my work is really all about creating space, as opposed to just organizing things.
I love it. It's true. And in the second half of the show, we're gonna deep dive into kind of your strategy and give an overview of that for people, because I love it. You have this kind of 5-step process that you work through, and I think it's so valuable, and I love it. I think it's interesting because I always say organization for me is about freedom and having that margin, and for so many people that feel overwhelmed, and I don't know if you see this with your clients, but I see it with mine, is that it's that I don't know what to do. So I feel like I'm almost going to I'm going to have paralysis. I'm not going to do anything, because there's, whether it's a fear of making a mistake, or they don't know what to do, or they don't have that, I hate to use the word vision of what something could be. So talk a little bit about like, where did that vision for you come from? Were your parents, because I know you said they were not into consumerism.
Yeah.
How did you start to develop these strategies on your own? Was it something that was learned from them? I mean, it seems like you had double things out of, I don't want to say necessity, but it was more situational because your parents were divorced. They were trying to simplify your transitions back and forth, as opposed to, we want you to have 25,000 things. So where did the strategies come from? Were they something that was learned or more self-taught?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of a combo of nature and nurture, but I feel like a lot of it was just innate for me. I was a sensitive kid. I'm still a sensitive adult. And so I notice things, I feel things, like when I walk into a room, I have a feeling, right? And my husband is always making fun of me because I'll never take like the first table at the restaurant. I'm like, this one feels weird. Like, can we be over there? And he's like, ugh. But I think being that way, I just always had this, I guess, I don't want to say superpower, but it was like I could go into any room and I could imagine how it would feel better if we moved something this way or got rid of this thing. It was always how I was as a kid. And it was like hard for me to resist when I was at a friend's house saying like, hey, can we take everything out of your closet and I can help you edit and then I'll put it back and make it really pretty. That was just something that was fun for me. And I think, again, it was about finding ways of getting control and satisfaction in a world that feels often very out of our control. I mean, especially given what we've all been through in the past few years, I think that need is strong for a lot of people of like, where can I find control? And so for me, it was always in my environment. And I think my parents were quite tidy, organized people, but they both would admit this, had no sense of aesthetics or style. And
which
so
you're the
I
total
really,
opposite. Like you're like,
yeah,
you this great design eye and
yeah, it was just something I loved beauty. And so I try to not think about it in a superficial way, but I always was attracted to beauty, beautiful spaces. Fashion always interested me. And so I just was sort of guided by that and always noticing things. And so, growing up, I just remember like seeing things in magazines or books and thinking, ooh, how can I do that at home? And mainly on a very limited budget and just being creative and repurposing things or moving things around or just trying to get kind of creative and scrappy. But I think it is just the way I always was and what I was interested in. And so I was always just pulling from outside. Definitely didn't come from my parents.
gotcha. You say something that I think I want to kind of circle back to, which is so you lead with feeling. And that is interesting. Like you said, you feel everything. And so I do a lot of work with the Enneagram and understanding personality types in people's relationship with clutter.
Yeah.
And the three kind of the framework that I use has to do, and I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram, but it looks at thinking, feeling, and doing are three centers. And I always find it interesting because it's a tool, right? It's not a direct, like, if you're this, then you're this. It's not as linear as that. But I think it's interesting when I talk to people and when I listen to them, whether their instinct comes directly from their head or their heart or their gut. And I love that you say, you feel first. I walk in a room and I feel it. And that is probably would lend itself into that creative part of you, that beauty part of you, that acting part of you. And what I love about it is a lot of times people will say, well, I'm that creative, I'm that feeler, I'm very emotional, so I am disorganized. And I love the fact, I'm like going to use you as my case example, that just because you have that big feeling center doesn't mean that you're immune from being organized or clutter-free or any of those things, because it's just about understanding kind of how you can use that superpower to get you those desired results. Because I think so many times people are like, I'm just creative, I have stuff, and that's me. And they kind of wave that white flag in defeat. And I love the fact that you're a feeling person and organized. It's a both and.
Yeah. And I would say like, I'm a creative more than anything. I've always been creative, 20 years in theater and acting. And I started writing when I was 8 years old also. And I think for me, organization, as you mentioned earlier, has been kind of the ticket to freedom in all areas of my life. And so I think often creative people think it's restrictive, and I can vouch for that. It really can be the opposite. It can be totally liberating.
I say that all the time. That's exactly, I say a lot of times people think of that as, the handcuffs, but it really is freeing you to do those things and have that mental space physical space, that margin in your life to be able to really to breathe, to have that negative space or that white space in your life, literally and figuratively. So I love that. Yeah. I guess I wanted to hone in because again, I do have a lot of people because my most recent work has really been centering around personality and how that connects up with clutter. And I just wanted to again say, like, here's somebody right here that's made a platform and is a leader in the space and is a feeler. So
yes,
there you go.
I know very little about the Enneagram, although I'm interested in it, but I do know that I'm a 7 with an 8 wing, if that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes, yeah, there you go. Okay. So I love it. All right. So we're going to take a break and then I want to come back and I want to talk about the book. I want to kind of break it down. I want to talk about your framework and I have a whole bunch of questions. So sit tight and we'll be right back. If you're a professional organizer or have thought about becoming a professional organizer, but not sure where to start, you might want to check out our SBO Partner Program. It's a community of professional organizers from all over the globe who are running their own independent companies, but looking for community and some business strategies on how to grow and scale their business. To learn more, visit simplybeorganized.com and click on the Work With Me tab. Okay, Shira. So within your book, Minimalista, and tell everybody, because what date does it launch? Because I forget what date
It comes out October 12th.
Okay.
It may be out. I'm not sure when this.
So I'm looking at my show notes. So actually, unless I do a change, this should be dropping at the end of September. So can they pre-order it?
Yes, it is available everywhere books are sold.
Okay, guys. So you'll go ahead and pre-order it. And October 12th was the day that my book baby was born.
You're kidding.
Hot Mess came out on October 12th, 2017. And you know why? That date will forever be embedded in my brain, not only because it was my book baby, but my firstborn is October 12th, 2000.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Wow, that makes me feel so good. What a special day.
Special day. So we will celebrate our book anniversaries together. I love it. So,
I love it.
So yes, so the book. Give us an overview of kind of what your goals are, because obviously lots of organizing books, lots of books on minimalism, lots of stuff on the marketplace. Give us a snapshot into what your book is all about, then we can dive into it.
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote my book because most of my clients are, not all, but most were busy working parents, primarily busy working moms who had tried all of the things and felt like they just didn't have the time and they didn't have the bandwidth and it all felt paralyzing and impossible. And so the biggest thing that I heard when I would organize people in their homes one-on-one is people would say, I cannot believe how much easier this was than I thought and how fast it was. In my head, this was such a mountain, and it's stunning what you can do with focus and kind of doing just small projects instead of trying to bang out an entire house. And so the way I design my book, it's 2 parts. The first part breaks down my 5-step foundation, which maybe we'll get into. But the second part is just a room by room guide to these quick, tiny tips, tricks, and hacks that you can do literally if you have 15 minutes to spare. And so my theory is the reason most people don't get organized is because it just feels too big and too overwhelming. And so I try to break every room into a million micro projects. So if your kitchen feels overwhelming, maybe you just tackle your utensil drawer in 15 minutes and edit it, organize it, put things back. And now you have mastered something. You have a feeling of being successful instead of unearthing the entire kitchen and then having to run to work or pick up the kids and feeling like a failure. So that was one of the big things I wanted to accomplish with my book. And I did also really want to weave in a lot of principles of minimalism. I think minimalism is like a big, scary concept for most people. And they think like, no, not for me. And my definition of minimalism really is about getting clear about your values and goals and priorities and stripping away the things that are in the way. So it's not about restriction. Again, it's about freedom and liberation and creating a home that really supports your life. And so I show lots of different examples of what minimalism can look like. Like I have designers featured in the book that have bold wallpaper and pink bedding. And I still consider them my version of minimalist because it's intentional. They've figured out exactly what they want and they've stripped away the stuff that's just clutter. So that's kind of in a big, broad nutshell. And I do also weave in a lot of tips around how to be more sustainable, both with more intentional purchasing, but also in thinking about when you do have all the big piles to get rid of, how can you do that in the most eco-friendly, sustainable way possible? So we can all kind of lighten our load on the planet.
I love it. I love it. I think it's great. And again, it's also super visual. It's really, again, aesthetically, I wish I had a copy. I know your publisher was like, I don't think we're going to get it to you in time because I would have shown it on the show, but it's really, it's a beautiful, hardback, beautiful pictures and images. And so I
wanted it to be like a beautiful coffee table book that you want to display, but then it's actually like an amazing toolkit inside in addition to all of the beautiful images.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you definitely accomplished it. So let's look at your 5-step process. Yeah. So you have this kind of methodology that you work through with, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's something that you use within every space so that you can take this regardless of whether you're doing a garage, an office, a kitchen, whatever. So can you walk us through what that is and each step of the way?
Yeah. So, and it took me years to realize that I actually did have a process because like I said, I would just walk into a room and kind of be like the Energizer bunny, and then years later, when I was writing my book proposal, I realized that I really was going through the same process again and again. And it's a simple process. It can be applied to anything as small as, the trunk of your car or your junk drawer or your entire garage. So, so here's the breakdown. So step 1 is clarify. And so that is really just about getting laser focused on your current goals, values, and priorities. Not even pertaining to your home. Just what do you care about right now? What do you want to create space for? What do you want to change in your life? And so when I'm working with clients, that's where we start. I don't even look at their space before we figure out those kind of big, meaty questions. And I really believe, before you can declutter, before you can organize, you've got to determine what you want, just at a base level. So that is number 1. And even in the context of a junk drawer, if you're going to tackle your junk drawer, you can think, well, what do I want? I want more ease in my day-to-day life. I want to be able to find things in 2 seconds. Maybe I want my kids to be able to find things in 2 seconds so they're not screaming mom all the time, but just clarifying, what do I want? Step 2 is editing. That is where I spend the majority of my time, both in the book and in my process with clients, is just now that we know what we want, we've got to strip away all the stuff that doesn't make sense, that doesn't get us closer to that vision. And then step 3 is organize. So that's where you set up intuitive systems. I try to make my systems as simple as possible. My kind of check is like, can a 5-year-old do this? Is it easy enough for my kids to maintain? And then step 4, this is one of the things that sets my process apart a little bit, is elevate. So as you've mentioned, I love design and I love aesthetics. And so I give tons of tips throughout the book about little things that make a big difference in terms of elevating your space. And you don't have to spend a ton of money to do this. It's just about being really intentional on, what do I want to surround myself with? What are the colors I like? What are the styles I like? What are the textures I want to see? What is important for me visually? And then the last step 5 is maintain. So once you've done all of this hard work and kind of gotten your house feeling great, life isn't static. Things are always going to be coming in and out, as you know. So I talk about just simple habit shifts to maintain your work, like the 1 in, 1 out rule, being the gatekeeper of your home, making really smart decisions about what comes in the future, and little easy things like the 5-minute tidy before bed, just so you can have your space remain feeling good.
I love it. And again, it's so simple. And I remember, going through a similar process myself where I wanted to be able to articulate what I was doing so I could be teaching my clients.
Yeah.
while I was doing this, not just have them go, well, I need her. I mean, yes, that gives you job security, but I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to, teach them these strategies, teach my kids these strategies, be able to give them. And I think when you have these steps that someone can go, okay, this is what I'm doing. And they can, again, brain dump and articulate and give language around these things that they often are struggle with knowing, I don't know what I want, or I don't know how to phrase this, or I don't know how this is making me feel, or whatever. That's where people get bottlenecked. And that's where, then they get overwhelmed. So I love that this really takes you through from start to finish. And recognizing, like you said, that it's fluid. You did touch on one thing that I want to kind of circle back. Cause again, when I look at again, I hate to keep saying, but I look at your Instagram feed, I look at, your brand, if you will, it's got this very sophisticated look, which often for a lot of people might look like you need a ton of money to be able to accomplish. Yeah. And I've talked about this, and I'm sure you have as well, but you could do this at any budget, at any given point in your life. It's not like if you have little kids, you can't do this, or what. Can you just speak into that a little bit about your advice for people that are either on a budget or going through like crazy life transitions where, they have stuff, their kids are in sports or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it's funny because I have had people say that they find some of my pictures intimidating or aspirational or any combo. And what's interesting to me is so I'm in a 1,200 square foot home. It's a 100-year-old house. And everything that I've done to elevate my house has not been wildly expensive. And I think the most impactful thing that I did was stripping away clutter. And so I always say, like, if you want to improve the look and feel of your space instantly, donate a bunch of stuff. Like, that is my number one tip for having your house feel better. And it is free. You may even make money if you want to sell things or have a garage sale. In addition to that, I think some of it, I always like the creative challenge of doing things on a budget. I do, my philosophy is around buying fewer but better things and investing in high quality, but less of it. So instead of buying like 10 new blouses, buy one blouse you really love that's high quality, that's going to stand the test of time. But in terms of elevating your home without spending a lot of money, most of the things I do not cost a lot of money. So like I said, number one, just stripping away clutter, having clear surfaces that feel good and are lovely to look at. My other favorite thing to do is just adding life. So adding a plant, adding fresh clippings from your garden. My favorite things are, we have like little olive trees outside of our house, and just clipping a few branches and putting them next to my nightstand.
Oh, how lovely.
And it feels like you're in a little boutique hotel.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that too. I mean, I bring fresh greens in. So I decorate at the holidays. I got rid of all my fake greens that I used to use. And I'm more fortunate where we live. I have friends that own like tree farms. And so they're always giving me fresh cuttings from, I mean, you name it. But it's beautiful and it's clutter free because it's just part of the outside. And then when it's done, it gets recycled. Do you know what I mean? And I don't even have to store it. And it's been so great. And then I have the freedom to get creative and change it up. Like, oh, I love that tablescape, but this year I want to do something a little different. And I love that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I do with clients before we buy anything, I always shop their own home. And so I'll say, do you have any art or like a mirror that we can put in your entry? And typically they're like, oh yeah, we've got a couple things in the basement. Like, let me yank it out. Or like, oh, the throw pillows that were here, what if we move them to this room? So most of what I'm doing costs $0. And then at the very end, after you've shopped your home, if there are specific things that you really want, I just say, go slow, buy one at a time. And for me, that's even more satisfying. Like, I don't love going out and like shopping like a crazy person. I like to be really slow and methodical and think about, what do I want? What would really make me feel good in this space? And make a list and think about it and have a budget and look at a few places. And then when I do buy the thing, it feels much more special because it's intentional and you've really thought about it and you've made an investment in your home. So I just want to encourage people, you do not have to have a massive budget. And the majority of the tips in my book don't cost any money. They're literally using what you've got to make it look elevated and lovely.
I love it. I think that is awesome. Okay. I have one other question that I want to ask you before two, before we go to break. So the first one is, in your life, because again, you've gone through seasons, and how old are your girls? You have two girls, right?
Yeah, they're now 10 and 12.
Okay. So those are fun ages, because there's like, they're independent enough, but they're
not in full-blown teen nightmare.
Exactly. So, but you've been through stages, starting this when you had a newborn to now. What are some things that have changed and evolved, maybe in your philosophy, in your practice, in the 12 years that you've been a mom and in your business? Like, what have you seen change?
Well, I think my answer might surprise you, because so my children do not share my need for order.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
so
they think, Mom, enough with the minimalism. And so in an interesting way, like, I think when they were little and they were toddlers, I still had that ultimate control of like what comes into our house and how it looks and how we put things away. And now that I have, tweens, I guess, getting into that teen territory, I've had to really look at letting go a little bit of my need to kind of hold the reins so tight on how their spaces look and feel. I've always had ultimate control over every place. I've lived in 25 different houses in my life. And
wow.
Yeah, I've moved a lot. And that was mainly because of acting.
I was going to say, is that from like,
Yeah, but I think it was like, okay, this is like my little sanctuary. And now becoming a mom and a wife, I have 3 other people and a dog who all have their own ideas. And so I've had to really reckon with myself around what feels fair to ask of them in terms of how our home is set up and what is unfair. And so where we've gotten to is, during the pandemic, we built a studio on our back deck for my husband, because he felt like the home was so my domain and everything was like put away and lovely and it benefited his life, but he never felt like he could just be messy. And so now he's got his own little cave in the back where he can do his own thing. And my kids, I've had to kind of find that middle ground of like, here are a few basic things. Like, I don't want you to have dirty dishes or trash in your room. Like, there are some ground rules we've got to have, but is it going to be perfectly curated and set up and organized? No, because that's not what they want. And I don't want to make their lives so oppressive that then it totally backfires and leads to years of therapy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's, for me, the biggest shift is just trying to let go and let other people have their own sense of what works for them within my home.
I couldn't relate more, although my husband's really neat and tidy. So I don't, that part, not, but I also have 2 girls, and I'm like, listen, it's not going to be great gardens. Like, we're not going to have rodents because there's, like you said, food, like, no, like, we draw the line.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, as my youngest just went off to college, and my older one, when she moved into her first apartment after the dorm, I remember her saying to me, and they used to threaten me that they were going to grow up and be hoarders just to, get under my skin. And she said to me, Mom, she FaceTimed me one day, and she's like, Mom, you have to look at this refrigerator. It is so disorganized. And she FaceTimes me and shows me the refrigerator. She goes, there is just stuff everywhere. And it looked like, I mean, I hate to use the word normal, but like, it just looked like
a basic fridge.
It looked like somebody who's not in our line of work's refrigerator. And I go, so that's like, not like, I was expecting, I don't even know what I was expecting. And she goes, there's nothing labeled, not everything's just shoved in there with no rhyme. And I go, yeah, like, your bar is not normal. Like that's a normal fridge, like what you are used to, where everything's in a clear Tupperware or lidded, and I have a little label, of what the leftovers are and whatever, and it's all zoned fruit in one area. Like that's not how
normal.
the average person lives. And she's like, really? And I'm like,
So funny.
So they do, they do see what's happening around.
Yeah. And I will say my kids, when they are intrinsically motivated, they have the skill of organization. They can whip their room into shape.
Well, because they've been given the tools.
Yes. So that I feel like, okay, I've done my job. They've got the tools, but now they get to do what they want with them within reason.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. And I always say, control what's yours to do, right? Like you do. And with the kids, shut the door. My husband's was more of a control freak when they were of one. And I go, just leave them be.
Yeah.
Like, as long as the common areas, like we had certain ground rules about, listen, if you want to be a slob and pick up dirty clothes off the floor, that's your business, but you're not leaving it in the common area that I work really hard to create. So
I'm so with you on that. Yeah. Living, dining, kitchen is off limits.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
absolutely. Okay. So before we go to our last break, tell everybody where they can find you, connect up with you, the book, again, all the things.
Perfect. Yes. So my website is my name, Shira Gill, ShiraGill.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Shira Gill. I share a ton of content, tips, hacks, resources there. And my book is Minimalista. It's out with Penguin Random House, and you can buy it Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local indie bookshop should have it as well.
Great. And like I said, we'll have links to all things Shira and her book in our show notes. So make sure you check them out. Okay. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to just put you in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions. So sit tight. All right, Shira, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you kind of walking us through this. And I love learning this backstory about you that I had no idea. We always love to ask our guests a few questions because obviously you're a source of inspiration for so many people. We would love to know what book has inspired you in your life. It could be personally, it could be professionally, but something that's kind of like a tried and true that's had an impact in your world.
Yeah. So I would say like one of my top books is called The Compound Effect. It is by Darren Hardy. And it's really just about the principle of that small, smart, consistent action adds up to massive transformation. And which, is so much of what our work is about. But it really inspired me, both in my life, in business, in organizing. He breaks down these very simple concepts, which I think for anybody, like he talks about even weight loss, like the habits that you make, even the tiniest thing, like whether you have, a scoop of ice cream before you go to bed, or you take a 10-minute walk before you go to bed, doesn't seem like a big deal. But if you do that same thing every single day, then he looks at people a year from now at how vastly different. And the same thing, of course, if you think about like little things like if you don't open your mail once a day, doesn't seem like a big thing. But if you don't open your mail for 6 months, you now are in a mountain of paper nightmare. So anyway, I love the principle. And I think he does such a great job of empowering people to start small with their goals and get out of that overwhelm and paralysis.
I love it. That's great. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about, so that spoonful of Nutella that I take sometimes before I go to bed, maybe I should rethink that and not. Just putting that out there, people. But anyway,
I used to be like a pint of ice cream a night girl myself, which nothing to brag about, but
well, I was when I was in my 20s and I could do that and burn it up. But that's no more. So that ship sailed a long time ago. Right. All right. And then our last question, which I think will be fun to ask you, because again, I think people have this assumption in our profession that every single aspect of our lives are organized or clutter-free or minimalist all the time. And like you're a real person, and we know that that's not true. So in this particular season of your life, with everything going on professionally as a mom, where do you feel like you're really thriving, and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
So in terms of thriving, I do feel like especially during the pandemic, like every square inch of our house is edited and organized. So I feel very dialed in, which is not a surprise there. And like specifically with my closet, I have a capsule wardrobe that I love. So everything in there fits me. I love to wear it. It all kind of goes together. It's easy to get dressed. And it's not a lot of stuff. So I feel great pride in kind of that setup that has made my life so much easier. In terms of hot mess, I would say, I don't know if this counts, but right now my schedule is a hot mess.
No, that totally counts. It could be, yeah, for sure.
I think, it's one of those, like the shoemaker's kid has no shoes or whatever that.
Yes. Cobbler's kid has no shoes. Yes. Yes. So I use it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like for me, I'm really good at editing and organizing my physical stuff. And when it comes to my life, I'm kind of a yes sayer and I get very excited. And especially, with this book launch and wanting to take the press and the podcasts and the travel opportunities, I recently looked at my calendar and just like held my head in my hands because it's just too much. And it's like anybody, I have to learn how to say no, how to set limits. And I normally do a pretty good job of that. But I think during this time with the book launch and juggling my job and the kids, it's just, I've said yes to too many things. And now my schedule is a hot mess.
And I'm glad that I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I'm glad that you said that because first of all, it humanizes you. And for so many people, I think that having that like, oh, she struggles too is empowering. Not that, misery loves company, but just to see that, you're not immune to that. But also it's a season of your life. Like this is like it's not every day you're launching a book. So right now you're saying yes to all these things. You're doing all these things. You're on overload, but it's situational. This is not your new norm. This is for a time period.
Yes.
And, I do a lot of talk about when I talk to people about, what I call calendar clutter. And it's like, is this a chronic issue or is this a situational issue? Are you just in a really busy season? If you've got kids graduating, you're launching a book, you're doing this, like there might be a lot of things happening and you're adding things to your calendar, just like you would be adding things to your closet without editing. And so of course it's going to get overwhelming, but in your case, it seems like this is again, for a specific period of time, and then you can dial it back.
That makes me feel better. Thank you. Because I do think it is a season and it's kind of a crazy season, but it's an abundance of good things. So totally. I'm kind of leaning into it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. And I think carving out that space as a busy working mom is always a struggle. Even though these are concepts I teach, I definitely do struggle to implement them in my own life. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anytime you need a pep talk or want some grace or permission or whatever, hit me up because
I will take it.
Absolutely. Well, Shira, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on our show, talking to our community. Wish you all the best with your book. I want everyone to check it out, Minimalista. If this is your first time tuning in to our show, welcome. Make sure you click the follow, subscribe button, whatever they're calling it these days, wherever you get podcasts. We're also on YouTube. So if you want to head on over there and watch us, you can see Shira's beautiful home behind us. And follow us on social media at Simply Be Organized. So until next week, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out.